This tutorial is going to help you get set up to use Illustrator for creating sprite sheets for an animation. This is not a requirement of the project, but it is an option. And if you're comfortable with working with Illustrator, it might be a very good option for you. So the first thing you're going to do when you open Illustrator is you're going to create a new document. And make sure you're not creating a print document because that doesn't make sense for screen. So what I'm going to do is showing you one I've already opened, but to show you how to find this setting, you go to Film and Video, and you want to go to 1920 by 1080, which is the size we're making our animations. So I'm going to say Create. And the reason I do it this way as opposed to just creating a new document, which you could certainly do, but this way it makes it 1920 by 1080, which is the size I want, and it sets it to RGB mode, which is what we need for screen. CMYK images don't make any sense for screen. Your screen can't read CMYK. So we want it in RGB. So I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to come in here, and once I make this, oops, let me go back. Once I make this document, you'll see that it sets up my document with a number of different outlines or rectangles. So this first rectangle here is called the title safe area. And this is where you want any text that you want readable on the screen. So put it within the title safe area here, and you can be assured that it will not get cut off. This second rectangle here is called the action safe scene. So this is anything that you want to make sure that gets on screen that needs to be seen by your audience needs to go in here. And this other area here is just the rest of the screen. If we were to think of this almost like as a print analogy, we could almost think of that sort of like our bleed. It's there, but nothing of importance should happen there. Once I've set this up, I like to come in and just draw a rectangle across the background because I don't like that transparent background. Let me just set my stroke to 0, my rectangle to white, and I'm just going to draw it all the way across the screen. I don't like working on the transparent background. I find it a little confusing. Now once I've done that, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to lock that layer so I don't accidentally draw on it. Because when I'm done, what I'm going to do is just delete that layer. So to create my animation, and I'm going to create something very, very simple just to conserve some time on this video, but you could draw something extremely complex. You could draw an entire background. You could draw anything that you could draw in Illustrator. You could make part of your animation. And I apologize, I am losing my voice a little bit. All right, so let me come in here. I'm just going to draw my little bean guy that I seem to always draw. Here's Mr. Bean Guy. We'll give him eyes. Okay, so that's my first layer. I could, if I wanted to, I could come and name these, which would probably be pretty smart. And then I'm going to keep drawing. I'm just going to make a new layer that's going to be above this one. And I'm going to draw on top. So you're making an animation. If you worked with the Photoshop timeline, it's a very similar method. By the way, one really good tip is to lock the layer underneath so you don't accidentally draw on it. Hopefully I haven't done that. Oh good, he's on his own layer. And I'm going to lock that layer, make a new one. At some point you might want to turn off the visibility of the other layers because it might become confusing. You might be able to tell my Wacom tablet is not functioning today, so this isn't my most fabulous bean drawing ever. Hopefully you'll get the idea. And again, you could fill these, you could create complexity, anything you can draw in Illustrator, you can certainly make into an animation. All right, so right now I have, let me name my layers. Let me make 2 more just so I have kind of a decent number to import. Again, forgive my drawing. I have never been able to draw very well with the mouse. Okay, let's make one more layer. I tried to install a new Wacom driver this morning and it tanked my laptop, so I decided to work without it. All right, so now I've got my file. Let's pretend that I had a whole bunch of layers here, which are all the frames for my animation. So I could have, you know, I could have as many layers here as Illustrator could support, and I don't really know what that number is. Now you may find it better to come in and turn off some of the other ones as you're working, just to keep your sanity as you're drawing, but I'm going to go ahead and turn these all back on. And let me save my Illustrator file. Okay, so the next step of this is to open Animate. And I'm going to create a new document. Don't worry about any of this, and I'll show you why in a second. I'm just going to say create whatever. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to import to the stage. And I'm going to go find my Illustrator document. And I'm going to say open it. Okay, now here, if you have more than one artboard, you could select different artboards. Now here I've got select all layers, but one thing I forgot to do before I save my file is I forgot to delete the background. So I'm going to unselect all layers, and I'm just going to select, oops, I don't know why that's not giving me my, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the layers that have my animation on them. So I'm not going to select the background layer. Now here, this is the important part, and it's a part where a lot of students miss, and then they don't understand why they don't have an animation. So you need to convert your layers to keyframes. All right. And then I'm going to also say, and this is why I didn't care about my initial setting in Animate, I'm going to say set the stage size to the same as the Illustrator artboard. And then I'm going to say import. And you can see down here that is brought in my lovely animation to keyframes. Now the nice thing about doing that is I could then come in, let's say I wanted to do some of the more complex drawing in Illustrator, but then you could come in and you could even go up to another layer and add some details, etc. Now one thing you also want to do, let's stop this guy, is you want to pull this out. So let me select all my keyframes down here, and I'm going to pull this. You have to hover right until you get to the end of your timeline, and you can see here, if you look up here, this is telling me I have 6 frames right here. So I want to pull this out so I can draw what is called on the twos, so that I'm drawing every other frame. So I'm going to just pull this out to 12. All right, so now you've got your animation and it's drawn on the twos. And again, mine is a obviously very simple, silly drawing, but you can, anything you can draw in Illustrator, you can bring in to Animate and make into an animation. The important thing is to remember that each frame needs to be its own layer. So there you go. That is using sprite sheets in Animate.